You're listening to KGNU in Boulder, 88.5 FM on your radio dial. That's what we started out with 40 years ago, telling people when we first went on the air. And when I joined the station 2 years later in 1980, that's what we were required to say. Of course, nowadays, if you listen in, you'll discover that we have a location in Denver. We reach Fort Collins, we reach the mountain towns, and on the World Wide Web, you can catch it anywhere in the world. Tim Russo currently serves as the station manager and ex officio board member at KGNU Community Radio. He's had a long history in journalism, photography, and radio. Prior to joining the KGNU leadership team, Tim was a Mexico and Latin American correspondent for Free Speech Radio News from 2001 to 2015, and also serving as vice chair of their board of directors from 2010 to 2017. He's no stranger to Boulder. Tim and fellow students utilized KGNU in his college days at the University of Colorado, where he was key in establishing the Department of Ethnic Studies there. His lengthy resume has early days of reporting for the Colorado Daily, freelancing for Getty, and reporting for Grassroots Free Speech Radio. He's deeply involved and dedicated to independent media and has been since the early 1990s. He's co-founder of a grassroots media coalition that has facilitated the launching of more than 18 indigenous Garifuna and Campesino community radio stations in Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, and Argentina. Tim has worked closely with local organizations throughout Mexico and Central America on strategic consulting. It goes on, but we're running short of time. He's well versed in Latin American politics, in community radio, and independent media. Please give a warm Boulder Rotary welcome to Tim Russo.
See the video up there. I'm going to go to a slideshow pretty quickly so you don't have to look so much at the screen, just at me. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for that very warm welcome and introduction. And thanks for sharing some of my past history. One thing indeed that I would like to say is, as we see in the article in the Daily Camera and what Jack mentioned that was in that article as well, saying 3 words, I was key in the formation of the Ethnic Studies Department. Let me just be clear. The Ethnic Studies Department came out of a movement that lasted many, many years, starting back in the 70s. And in 93 and 94, there was a significant movement that was student-led, primarily from organizations, student groups of people of color that helped to spearhead a movement that culminated in a 6-day hunger strike that many people participated in. I was one of many, many people that were involved in that. And we need to be careful in our biases in the media these days to make sure that we're not erasing and changing the significance and importance of the history and the people that led and participated in different movements. I think there was no one key person, certainly not a key factor, anything more than the time was right and there was a lot of dedicated people and a tremendous amount of support there. So thank you for hearing that. It was just something that's been on my mind since I saw the article that came out, which was a fantastic article highlighting the history of KGNU as we approach our 40th anniversary. One of the things I'd like to say as well, Carl, appreciated hearing the update on the struggle to end polio. Part of the work that the community radios across Latin America that I was involved in, primarily in Central America, Honduras, where we had a strong network of community radios that are run by Afro-Indigenous Garifuna, Campesino peoples there, is those radios serve to fill a void where information about the types of health risks and preventable health issues are not being reached in their communities. There are high levels of illiteracy, low levels of formal education in many of these communities, and communities radios throughout Latin America, and in particular in these areas, much like the one that Carl mentioned, community radio fills that void. and has filled that void and educated people about health risks and the programming that they can, and the resources that they can find within their proximities, and how they can take simple measures like covering water tubs, not having old tires that collect water in these very humid areas, et cetera, to reduce the spread and the propagation of different types of diseases. So community radio has served around the world many, many different purposes in general to fill the void of information that people need in their particular areas. So I wasn't brought here to talk about my personal history. I appreciate you taking a moment to hear that. I was brought to talk a little bit about KGNU. So I prepared a little document here that I'll read, and I'll try to flip through a few of these slides in the meantime as well, so we can have a look at the KGNU vision, which builds on 40 years of a very dedicated mission and volunteers. As KGNU forges into its 40th year on air next week, we are celebrating the milestones and foundations laid by the hundreds of dedicated visionaries, volunteers, listeners, supporters, and community members who have participated in the various stages and iterations of KGNU since its first days as a mere concept to amplify voices in Boulder who felt their music, culture, and critical views to local, state, national, and international affairs were not represented through the profit-driven media landscape. Nearly 40 years into the project, we have many people to thank, including Rotary Club member Jack Rummel, longtime Ragtime America host, who has dedicated at least one day, and oftentimes more than one day a week, for the last 38 years to producing what he calls a little tiny genre in the grand scope of things. Jack, like so many other KGNU volunteers, have dedicated decades of heart and soul to KGNU. They have been joined now by many new volunteers and listeners who have added to the pulse of KGNU, a community-powered media outlet. As written in KGNU's very first program guide and magazine, published back in 1978, community radio offers a unique approach to radio broadcasting. Basic to community radio is access and participation. Volunteers participate at all aspects of the operation, from serving on the board of directors, like Barb, to answering telephones, to helping raise funds. The idea that radio can be a community project with participation open to everyone. Jim back there has a show with the Community Foundation, which we love seeing him once a month come in early in the morning time, taking time out from the many things that he's dedicated to in the community. In community radio programming can then reflect a diversity of interests. Our hope is that KGNU will affect the daily lives of our listeners. That was written in the very first program guide in 1978. 40 years later, we are witness to the growth and relevance of this community project. This week, the Boulder County Commissioners passed a proclamation resolving May 22, 2018 to be KGNU Community Broadcasting Day, encouraging Boulder County residents to, quote, celebrate the importance of local independent community media and its vital role in the democratic process. Let me read that again. Celebrate the importance of local independent community media and its vital role in the democratic process. This proclamation and a similar City Council proclamation expected on May 22nd are of extreme importance now more than ever. As an accelerated consolidation in the commercial media landscape has begun, a ripple effect that threatens the overall capacity and quality of local journalism, impacting not only Colorado's last statewide print media, the Denver Post, but also Boulder's very own 128-year-old Daily Camera. In 1998, 20 years after KGNU began broadcasting from a small shack behind the Millennium Harvest House off 28th Street on the banks of the Boulder Creek, representatives of the World Association of the Community of Radios wrote a resource guide for community radio around the world, declaring, quote, it should be made clear that community radio is not about doing something for the community, but about the community doing something for itself. It's about the community owning and controlling its own means of communication. As commercial media and entertainment continue to be increasingly consolidated in its ownership, community media becomes an ever more important as people search for trusted local outlets. KGNU took the first steps towards building a lasting local community-powered media resource that would reflect and affect the everyday lives of our communities just 40 years ago, when a course at the Free School titled a desperate attempt to start a non-commercial radio station in Boulder was offered. You can read about that in this week's Boulder Weekly, with a nice article there offering a retrospective of the early days of KGNU, the 4 years that it took to launch the radio station, and some turbulent times that even led to the unplugging of the station in 1980. Against all odds, KGNU, and more so, the people that powered the movement behind KGNU were determined to have a functioning, community-powered media outlet. KGNU has consistently built upon that vision over the decades. Jo Ellen Kaiser, many of you might not know who she is if you're not involved in the independent media realm. She's the executive director of the Media Consortium, a national network of independent media outlets that include magazines like Mother Time, or Mother Jones, Ms. Magazine, The Progressive, Truth Out, and many others, roughly 100. She recently wrote an article about independent media, how independent media increasingly influences local and national conversations and policy. She writes, a groundbreaking article in Science based on a study conducted by Harvard professor Gary King proves that a better way to secure a media system that works for democracy is to strengthen independent news outlets. People care at a very fundamental level about the schools their kids attend, about their own reproductive choices, about their communities, neighbors, and friends. They hunger for stories that impact their everyday lives. And those are the stories they will talk about and share. Now again, as KGNU celebrates 40 years amplifying community voices, music, and culture, we are presented with several new challenges and opportunities to work together, to roll up our sleeves, to strengthen participatory processes, and to strive to meet the milestones and goals required to implement and expand upon the potential of the KGNU vision by reinforcing the foundations of a permanent community media center that offers critical programming and media training for Boulder and beyond. It was recently written about KGNU, actually just yesterday, that in the time of technology, algorithms, rotations, and norms of popularity, KGNU is about authentic, passionate, deeply involved, and actively engaged people, human beings, doing what they do for you. It's this human factor that sets KGNU apart. This human factor happens in real time. There is a spontaneity and beauty in the simple idea that by nature is rough around the edges, served up straight, honest, authentic, passionate, and unbridled. November 2017, City of Boulder residents, thank you, voted overwhelmingly, 82% in favor of approving an extension on the Community Culture and Safety Capital Improvements Tax. KGNU stands to benefit from the extension of the CCS with a matching grant of $1.25 million to expand, upgrade, and modernize the main facilities in Boulder, converting our current building into an environmentally sustainable and resilient facility equipped with additional digital studios, a permanent media makers training space, an expanded community space, and a small performance space. All integral components of a functioning community media resource center for the future. That can't happen without you. Just to end, in the words of Jose Ignacio Lopez Vigil, the grandfather of community radio in Latin America, when radio fosters the participation of citizens and defends their interests, when it truly informs, when it helps resolve the 1,001 problems of daily life, when cultural diversity is stimulated over commercial homogeneity, when women are main players in communication, when no type of dictatorship is tolerated, not even the musical dictatorship of the large recording studios. That is community radio. The purpose is different. Their best efforts are put at the disposal of Their best efforts are put at the disposal of civil society. The purpose, hence the name, is to build community life. I invite all of you to join KGNU on this journey of community-powered media. Discover the power. Tune in to 88.5 FM, 1390 AM, or go online at kgnu.org as we celebrate the history that opened the doors to the imaginable. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share this conversation with you, and I hope we can open it up to some additional conversation.
deciding what the program is?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the structure of KGNU, and I'll try to make this a short answer for you. The structure is we have a board of directors. The board of directors hires a station manager. A station manager hires staff. In this case, I came into a very robust staff at KGNU. And then there's a volunteer committee structure that's there that helps to govern the station as well. All of the board members are volunteers at the station and are required to invest quite a fair amount of their personal time into different aspects, including participation in at least one, if not more, committees. So we have a robust committee system that includes a program committee that has the mandate of reviewing the programming, receiving any new proposals for programming, and offering that feedback to the music director and to the news director, who then offer that feedback directly back to the hosts like Jack, like Jim, and others who spend time on the air.
Are there any more questions for Tim? If not, oh, there's.
Would you recall what happened in 1980?
Sure. I may not be the most equipped person for that. There is a detailed timeline on our website that you could take a look at under about KGNU and the history of KGNU. Roughly, there was a bit of an internal power struggle. And the way it is related on our website and from those members of the organization that have been involved for quite some time, and Jack, I believe, got involved right after this took place. There was an attempt to drive the radio into a more commercial setting, and the board of directors decided that they were, with dwindling funds and dwindling community support, going to pull the plug on the project. They did in March, I believe, of 1980, and quickly the board members that were not present at that meeting, who had boycotted that meeting, along with some of the core people that had launched the community radio and those that wanted to see a community-powered media entity in Boulder, organized quickly and were able to get the station back on the air within about a month, and hired Fergus Stone, there's a nice mention and back history in the Boulder Weekly that just came out yesterday, where Fergus kind of highlights some of this as well. Fergus was hired as the station manager for a brief period of time to try to launch the first fundraising on-air fund drive, and from that time slowly began to build more and more community support, looking at what it was that the community wanted in a community-owned media outlet.
What's the difference between community radio and public radio?
Fantastic question. I think there is a distinction. Public radio, we think, and public media, we think very much of here in Colorado Public Radio, Rocky Mountain PBS. And the difference is really the power behind the programming, I think. Community radio and community radio around the country, you may find some hybrid stations like KGNU that receives roughly 10 to 15% of its operating budget through Corporation for Public Broadcasting grant. But 85% of the funding comes through listener members, contributors that support the station directly, and other opportunities that we can find through small grants and donations. The people on the air are not paid to be on the air. The people on the air, because they're dedicated to their community, the voices, the cultures, and the issues. And that's why it's oftentimes rough around the edges, as we said. It won't be quite as refined. It won't be quite as polished as what you'll find on Colorado Public Radio, that pulls a lot of nationally syndicated programming from NPR, and also has a tremendous staff and a tremendous facility in the south of Denver. So community media has really been about that participation and access. It's about people having access to the public airwaves, the people's airwaves, to be able to air and produce the stories and the issues that are close to their hearts, and to learn the traits of journalism and music industry as well. Carl.
Yeah. For those of us who have a woman in our life named Alexa, how does Alexa find KGNU?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I haven't sat in front of an Alexa device personally, so I haven't said, "Hey Alexa, play KGNU." But that's the first thing that I would try. Yeah. My sister, and I'll reveal this, at Christmas this year, her son, who's in high school, he gave her the equivalent of the Google Alexa, whatever that one is, the Google device. And we tried it immediately. It was the first thing we tried. We turned it on and said, "Hey, play KGNU." And sure enough, it found it. And it found the show that was playing at that particular time. So it popped right up. There's a lot of marketing these days through the digital delivery, and people are interested in utilizing that tool. There are some tools that we're going to be exploring as a radio station that might help make it easier for people to find KGNU on devices like Alexa and Google. But from what I see, at least with the Google ones, you can say, "Hey, Google, play KGNU," and you'll get whatever's on the air right then and there. And if you want the only music station that we run as well, the online, you can say, "Hey, Google, let's check out afterfm.com." And you'll get a 24/7 music stream of some curated music from many of our hosts and DJs like Jack and so many others.
What do you think is the key challenge facing the success of KGNU right now?
I think with any project and media project, not exclusively media, is maintaining relevancy for its constituency and the changing demographics in the area that it covers or is focused on. So what we are looking at from a strategic perspective is how do we take a look at how this region is changing, what people are asking for, what the demographics are, how we can begin to have that reflected in the participation on air, in the governance, and through the programming. And that's not an overnight process. That's a long process. It's an arduous process. It takes community participation. It takes a significant amount of engagement, and it takes a lot of willingness on both sides, both to be receptive and to listen, to hear, and to make hard changes sometimes that folks may be uncomfortable with. Two gentlemen over here.
Yes, as a representative of community radio, I'm wondering how you feel about the struggles that our local newspapers, not just the camera, but around the state and country are going through now.
Yeah, and I'd allude to that a little bit in what I babbled off to you there a moment ago. I think it's a very challenging time on a couple of levels. Again, the media consolidation, to say it bluntly, yeah, there's a tremendous amount of concern about digital first media and their hedge fund owners, Alden Global Capital, and what that means for the newsrooms, for not only the Daily Camera, not the Denver Post exclusively, but I believe it's 14, if not 18 newspapers here in Colorado alone that Alden Global Capital through Digital First Media owns, generating roughly, get these numbers right for you, roughly $19 to $22 million in profit, 22% profit margin off of the media here in Colorado. That's their second largest market, only second to the Bay Area in California that has a slightly higher profit margin. I was at the Denver Press Club roundtable the other night. They've had two this week discussing different options to save the Denver Post. It was a fascinating conversation for me to witness. Really, it was a listening session for me. Many of the people that were in that room are longtime Denver Post reporters, consumers, Rocky Mountain News reporters, and others from the traditional, what we call legacy media, the print media. And they're very, very challenged right now. They're concerned about their jobs. They're concerned about the well-being of local journalism as an entity. And one of the questions that was pitched several times was, is the Post, is the Daily worth saving? It's a tough question. It's a very tough question. People begin and have begun to perceive the quality of the content that they're receiving because of shrinking newsrooms as greatly reduced and diminished. It's an eroded landscape at this point. There's a lot of challenges, and this is the same time that those papers are making for their owners more money than they ever have. And it's through marketing, and one fellow stood up and said, if all we can expect are the Sunday coupons, then why are we going to continue to subscribe or purchase this? Another person that had marketed for the Post for over 30 years said she didn't feel good entering a room of low-income elderly people in a community of 5,000 in Denver to try to pitch subscriptions to the Denver Post because she didn't feel that it was any sort of content of quality in the package that she was given to offer them. This is coming from people that have worked as career journalists, marketing people, and otherwise there. We're going to have a conversation on KGNU with Joellen Kaiser and hopefully Robert McChesney, who has been the founder of the Free Press and talked significantly over the years about press and the common good and looking at alternative models and what are some options for legacy media and other models for media in general moving forward. We'll have that conversation hopefully on the morning magazine, 8:30 to 8:35 next Wednesday. So that would be a good opportunity to hear some interesting national perspective on some of what's happening here. And there are some other great resources that are linked to on our website about the things that have been happening around the local journalism landscape. But again, most of the primary newspapers, even a few weeklies here in Colorado at this point are owned by Digital First Media and Alden Global Fund. And you can see that content is pulled from primary sources and pushed out to the others. So there's a reduction in local content every week, you know.
No more questions? Tim, I think in particular in that answer, that last answer that you gave, you really brought it home to us how important it is that Boulder has a resource such as KGNU that is independent, that is driven by the community, and is non-commercial, not beholden to any other people outside the community. And so we want to thank you for coming to talk to us about that great resource. And you probably thought that you had heard the last mention of polio today already, but you haven't, because in appreciation for you're coming here today and spending the time and informing us about KGNU, our club is honoring you with a donation of 100 doses of polio vaccine to the Boulder Polio Plus Fund.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. It's a true honor. And thank you for everything that each and every one of you does for the communities that you represent.